We're going to take a look at events today in the United States of America, including some really extraordinary stories, I think they're extraordinary, that just do not make mainstream media in the United Kingdom for some reason. I'm joined by Nick Harper, LBC's correspondent in the US. Nick, good afternoon, of course, to you. Let's begin with the accusation by Mike Pompeo that America's accused China of attempting to bully Britain.
That's right, Nigel. Yeah, good afternoon. It's some very strong words from the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. At the moment, we're seeing China, I guess, kind of wooing the United Kingdom, really going on something of a PR offensive at a time that the UK is looking at this security review of 5G networks, trying to decide which ones to use, and it could end up in a ban of any Huawei technology. Now, of course, the United States would love that to happen. So they're putting the pressure on the UK and attacking China in the process. So Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has said that China is using coercive bullying tactics. And he's saying that Huawei is an extension of the Chinese Communist Party's surveillance state. Pompeo also reminding the UK of that special relationship, saying that free nations deal in true friendship and desire mutual prosperity, not political and corporate kowtow.
Yeah, it's amazing. The American administration all the time being very, very nice about our country. Now, there's been a House Judiciary Committee meeting this afternoon on police brutality. Please bring us up to date with anything that's developed from that.
Yeah, so this has been really, I guess, the big push from the protesters over the last week or so. They are now pushing for action. They're calling for police reforms. In some instances, they even want budgets cut and that money used to help social programs. So up on Capitol Hill, the House of Representatives, their Special Judiciary Committee has been holding this hearing, specifically looking at police brutality. We've been hearing from George Floyd's brother. Philanese Floyd has been talking about how his brother died essentially over what was a counterfeit $20 banknote, and he's been saying that, is that what a black man's worth is? $20. He said enough is enough. He said it was terrible to see in that video, which I guess many of us watched, of George Floyd dying under that police's neck. He said that was a terrible, heart-wrenching thing to have to watch. And he said, look at the streets, look at all the people who are marching. They are saying enough is enough. The family lawyer also spoke, telling lawmakers that they have the power to make sure that George Floyd's death was not in vain. Now, the idea is that the House of Representatives will put together a bill, new regulations on police reform. They're hoping to vote on that next week. They're still hashing out the details, but potentially they could ban chokeholds, the like of which we saw being used on George Floyd. But the president may even put out an executive order in the next couple of days in which he tries to tackle police reform himself.
Now, you're right, lots have been marching, but some have gone a bit further than that. And I was just astonished, Nick, this morning, when the first story I saw was that in Richmond, Virginia, a statue of Christopher Columbus, the man that found America, was effectively burnt and taken down.
That's right. I mean, I guess a lot like the Edward Colston statue in Bristol. Here in the United States, there are controversial figures that some protesters say it's time to rewrite the history on. So here we have Christopher Columbus, a statue in Richmond, Virginia, another one in Boston. The Boston one was beheaded, the one in Richmond, Virginia, torn down, set on fire, thrown in a lake. People here, because we have Columbus Day, it's one of the federal holidays, like a bank holiday, they're saying that needs to be renamed mark the fact that he was involved in the murder of indigenous populations by coming here to the US to begin that colonial rule. So they even want not just the statues removed, but Columbus Day renamed as well.
Yeah, I mean, the difference, of course, is that Colston was a figure perhaps quite well known in Bristol, but not known in London. Columbus is a name that virtually every school child that's brought up in the Western world knows about. Has President Trump responded to this Columbus story?
He hasn't on it yet, but it will be interesting to see what he does say, because statues have ignited a lot of controversy here in the US. I mean, not just Columbus, but generals who were involved in civil war movements and supporting slavery. Those statues are being removed as well.
Now, talking to the president, I did hear him once say publicly that he thought Gone with the Wind was a great film. So it's obviously one of his favourites. And we now hear it's been temporarily removed from HBO.
It has, it has. I mean, this is all part of, I guess, companies re-examining their public image, looking at what they're involved in and how that sits with things that are happening at the moment. And that re-examining has come to HBO Max. They carried Gone with the Wind on their streaming service here in the US, that 1939 movie, hugely popular, by some estimates, the highest grossing of all time when you take inflation into consideration. However, they've removed it because of this problematic depiction of slavery, which back in 1939 was perhaps thought acceptable, but obviously not so today. So they're taking that down temporarily, and I guess we're likely to see other streaming services, I guess, review what they have within their vaults and whether they need to remove some of those as well.
Nick, thanks for joining us, LBC's correspondent there in the USA. I mean, quite astonishing stories, but of course, we heard yesterday Little Britain no longer will be available on the BBC, on Netflix or anywhere else. This is cultural Marxism, and they will do their best to eradicate anything and everything they dislike. If you think in this country they'll end with statues that are linked to slavery, you've no idea what is coming unless somebody at the top of this country actually has the moral courage to stand up and say, this is ridiculous.